We've seen the market flooded with cathinones right now. They're colloquially known as bath salts because when they were first sold, they were sold in stores under this name bath salts so that authorities wouldn't discover that they were actually drugs. And methylone is one of the most common cathinones and the most common drug sold as Molly today. When you look at the numbers from both ecstasy data, the lab program, from law enforcement confiscations, and from dance-safe in the field testing with the chemical reagents, it's pretty clear that the majority of what's out there right now in the market is methylone or another of the cathinone drugs. Even though it doesn't appear to be that much more dangerous, the influx of cathinones, I believe, is the primary reason why MDMA-related deaths have increased so dramatically over the last 5 years. And I'll explain why right now, and once again, it has to do with prohibition. And it's because the appropriate dose, the recreational dose for methylone and many other cathinones is quite a bit higher than it is for MDMA. And young people base their dose on what the underground culture is saying and what their friends are saying. And when methylone is predominantly the drug out there being sold as Molly, and people are taking 250 and 300 milligram starting doses, which you can do with methylone, and redosing throughout the night, that becomes the norm. But they don't know they're taking methylone. They think they're just taking Molly, and they think it's pure MDMA. And now suddenly they get pure MDMA, or they give it to a friend for the first time and tell them, this is how much you're supposed to do, and they start taking an initial dose of 300 milligrams and redosing, et cetera. That will increase the chance of having an adverse reaction, a hyperthermia, serotonin syndrome reaction. Another reason that deaths have increased is that most of the MDMA is now coming out in the form of loose powder, as well as the cathinones, right? The drug, ecstasy or Molly, whatever is being consumed as loose powder rather than pressed tablets, which is what ecstasy is supposed to be. I hate using slang terms. I try to get everyone away from it to start using the real chemical names. There is really no such thing as ecstasy. There's no such thing as Molly. There is only MDMA, methylone, butylone, etc. But the fact that the drugs are being consumed in loose powder form today, much, much more, almost predominantly, has changed user behaviors. There was a kind of psychological serving size effect, a limitation on the number of tablets someone would swallow back in the 90s. We rarely saw people take more than 2. It is like, 1 is supposed to be what you take, right? And, if it's kind of low, and a lot of the doses with MDMA and them were kind of low, maybe you took 1.5 or 2, but you rarely saw people, taking more than that. And that kind of limited the dosing. Today, with loose powder, people are finger dipping. Who's done it? Yeah, don't feel judged. Yeah, you're right, you have to, because you can't bring a milligram scale into a party and whip it out with your little capsules, right? But, I encourage anyone, especially if you're, distributing, to use a milligram scale and dose them out and not go higher than 125 and tell people what they are and test your drugs first, especially. It's more important if you're distributing that you do that because you are now responsible for other people. MDMA is more a psychedelic than it is a stimulant. Despite what the media says, it's not a hallucinogenic stimulant. In high doses, it can mimic a stimulant to some degree, but in a proper dose, most people say they feel actually more relaxed than they do amped up. And, classic psychedelics, you take your one dose, you come up, you have your plateau, you come down. You've been to Arrowwood. Who has been to Arrowwood? you can see they have these graphs for every drug that shows a time chart of when you come up, your plateau, you come down. That's your typical way of describing a psychedelic effect. Whereas with cocaine, you see people snorting little bits throughout the night. Well, the cathinones are often used more like a traditional stimulant than they are like a psychedelic. And that's bleeding over into MDMA today because of the confusion on the market between the cathinones and MDMA. And I am trying to stop that.